Our meditation today is called Joseph Cried Aloud, based on Genesis 45 verses 1 through 15. Crying is not a man thing. Men are expected to have their emotions under control. It is not manly to cry. But in our text today, we find Joseph crying so loud as in wailing, enough to be heard by the people in the adjacent area of his palace. Why was Joseph crying so loud? That's the story of our text today. Last time, we were talking about Joseph being sold by his brothers to Ishmaeli merchants, who in turn sold him as a slave in Egypt. Joseph was purchased by a captain in the Pharaoh's army named Potiphar. It did not take long for Joseph to show some promise even as a slave. He seemed to have the Midas touch that his master eventually put him in charge of all the servants of his house. He was to manage everything and had access to everything except, of course, the captain's wife. But an unfavorable incident put Joseph behind bars. Mrs. Potiphar falsely accused him of unwanted sexual advances, although the truth goes the other way around, and Joseph ended up in prison. Behind bars, the same thing happened to Joseph. Joseph was a model prisoner. The warden eventually put him in charge of the prison's affairs. Two of the prisoners had dreams, and Joseph interpreted them correctly. One day, the Pharaoh had a dream. No one could figure out its meaning. Joseph was summoned from prison and interpreted it. It was about an impending 7 years of good harvest to be followed by 7 years of famine. He also suggested a solution on how to avert disaster during the famine years. Long story short, the Pharaoh was impressed and put Joseph in charge of the grain procurement and storage project. He was also elevated to a rank second only to the king. When the years of famine eventually arrived, Egypt was ready for it. It had all the grains the land and its people needed, while the other countries around it were not. Among the regions affected by the famine was Canaan, where Joseph's family lives. Joseph's brothers were therefore forced to go down to Egypt to purchase grains. This is where the drama of our text begins. For the first time after many years of being separated, Joseph met his brothers again. He concealed his identity to them at first. He wanted to know a thing or two about his beloved father Jacob and his younger brother Benjamin. It must have been mixed emotions for him. It's been 22 years since his brothers sold him. But now his dreams have come true. His brothers came from Canaan, bowing low before him. Was he to take revenge, or was he to take the high road of forgiving and taking care of them? As the story goes, Joseph took the high road. After playing a trick or two to his brothers and getting to see his youngest brother Benjamin, he was overcome by emotions. He could not keep his emotions in check. He also asked all his servants to leave them, and then he let out a loud cry that was heard all over the palace. Why was he crying? And why so loud? Even those who heard it were surprised. Joseph was crying so loud, first because he was overcome by a flood of emotions. His tears must have been tears of pure joy. He got to see and dine with his youngest brother by the same mother, Benjamin. He learned that his father still lives and doing well. He is grateful that the famine now in its second year has not done them any harm. He heard how sorry his brothers are for what they had done to him. Now they are together, reunited, albeit he is still incognito, he shed tears of purest joy. Second, his tears were tears of emotional release. There is no doubt in my mind Joseph felt bad that his brothers sold him. He may have carried that feeling with him while serving as a slave in Potiphar's house. He may have been thinking about it while languishing in prison. He may have been waiting for the time when he can take revenge now that he is in the position of authority and power. That is humanly speaking. But now that his awaited moment has come, his brothers at his mercy, he heard them admit to their fault and how sorry they were for their past actions. His choice has been made clear. He need not punish them anymore. All those were too sudden and all too much for him. He had to let it all come out. So he had to cry. He cried so loud that even the household of Pharaoh heard about it. All in all, we can say those were tears of cleansing, anger and frustrations that melted into tears. Heavy emotional burdens carried around for years now lifted off his shoulders. It was a cry of emotional release. It will not be hard anymore to take the high road of reconciliation and forgiveness. But there is more. He had an epiphany moment that made all the difference. Coming out of his bout with heavy crying, he eventually revealed himself to his brothers. He told them something that says where he was at in relation to them and the fate he suffered in Egypt. Verse 4 of our text says, Then Joseph said to his brothers, Come closer to me, and they came closer. He said, I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed or angry with yourselves because you sold me here. And here's the line, For God sent me before you to preserve life. Verse 7 says, as Joseph was continuing to speak, God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant on earth, and to keep alive for you many survivors. So it was not you who sent me here, but God. He has made me a father to Pharaoh, and Lord of all his house, and ruler over all the land of Egypt. Joseph saw things from the divine perspective. His brothers meant him harm, but God meant it for good. Things happened for a purpose. It was to preserve for all of them a remnant on earth. Last week, we placed ourselves in the shoes of Joseph's siblings. This time, we can reflect on the things from Joseph's perspective. Joseph underwent moments of transformation so he could overcome negative emotions with one of gratitude. If we feel aggrieved and unjustly treated, bent at revenge and holding on to bad feelings, we need the transformational moment that Joseph had. Perhaps it will help if we look at things from the divine perspective the way Joseph did. Things happened for a purpose. God, who at difficult times seemed to be absent, can still make things work together for good to them that love the Lord, more so to them who are called for a purpose. It is interesting to note that at the end of their crying session, the brothers were talking to Joseph, he whom they could not speak a kind word in the beginning. Joseph, the one they sent away and sold to become a slave, is now the one saying, Come immediately, I will take care of you. Joseph's story was full of pain and tears, but closed with triumphant, happy ending. I trust that all of our tearful stories will end up like Joseph's, and that in our struggles, looking back, we can also trace the fingerprints of the hand of God trying to accomplish His purpose in us and through us. Amen and amen.